I can never get up the energy to do the Wes intro, so I'm just going to go, welcome back to Ty, and now the new guy, because it's just all Brett all the time in these parts.
The new guy. Ty and the new guy.
Ty and the new guy. I have taken over quite ably for the, I don't want to say lackadaisical, I don't want to say lazy, but the absent Wes Chatham, the can't bother to do his fucking job, Wes Chatham. By the way, I just used the F word, so I just got this video demonetized on YouTube. But we're not monetized on YouTube anyway. So if you want to listen to a podcast that is not monetized on YouTube, you have selected the correct one. This is the one.
Add a bleep. Just censor it. It's all good.
So, Brett, we were talking about doing the Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I had talked about with doing Wes. I actually watched the movie with Wes at his house in Georgia last time I was in Georgia.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, he hadn't seen it yet, so he and I and our wives watched it. He was surprised. He liked it. He didn't expect to like it. He liked it a lot, and I think he wanted to show it to his kids. I don't know if he ever actually did, but he was like, "Oh, my kids would
totally
love this."
Could.
Yeah, you totally can. You could get away with that one.
Yeah.
But instead of just talking about the movie, which I think is okay to do, what I want to talk about, what I think is more interesting, is why it is so hard to do an adaptation. Why it is so hard to do, especially a game adaptation.
100%. Yeah.
The list of terrible game, and mostly video games, but the list of terrible video game adaptations is 100 times longer than list of good game adaptations.
I mean, yeah, I feel like the list of good you can count on, I want to say one hand, maybe two, but like,
no, this is a one-hander.
Yeah, it's so true. I don't know why it's so hard, but I do think this one qualifies as a good one. Because you summed it up. Like, that was my thought seeing it. Was I just walked away surprised. Like, same as you guys said. I was just like, I can't believe how good this was. I can't believe how much fun I had. I didn't expect any of that. So I kind of walked out just like, this was great.
What I think would be interesting is to get, I mean, I am a screenwriter and you are obviously a filmmaker, you're a director. To get sort of the creative perspective on why it's so hard to do these adaptations. I don't think you've never done an adaptation, have you?
Yes and no. I did a movie called The Monkey's Paw, which was
okay. So
trying to
off of the famous short story.
Yeah, but I wasn't the original writer on it, and it's also a short story, so it's like it's not. I don't think it's quite the same heft.
I think it still counts though. Okay. It's still an adaptation of a previous work, and obviously, the show that I most recently did was an adaptation of my own books. Yeah. But the thing with those books is that The Expanse, which is the project that Wes and I worked on together, initially was a pitch for a video game way back in the ancient days. Yeah, this was like in the I think this was before 2001. It was. No, maybe not. Maybe it wasn't before 2001. But it was right around the time of 9/11. Was when this was happening.
This is wild. I had no idea.
Yeah, it was a crazy long time ago. But so we did it as I did it as a video game pitch. It didn't go anywhere. We pitched it to a Chinese company, and they were like, "Oh, we can't spend $100 million." So that was the end of that. But then I started running it as a tabletop game, like a Dungeons and Dragons style game, but with sci-fi rather than magic.
Yeah.
And then it was many years later, Daniel Abraham, my writing partner, was playing in that tabletop game and said, this would make a good book. We should write a book. And that's when we wrote the first book.
That's so fun. So really, the source material was an adaptation of your video game, which was...
So it was a video game pitch that turned into a tabletop game that turned into books, which were then adapted to TV. And because they were adapted to TV, now there are video games and role-playing games based on The Expanse. So it's like this big circle.
There's just levels of Inception here that are just like too much for my brain to wrap itself around. That's crazy. That's awesome, though. People don't realize how expensive video games are to make, by the way.
Making a AAA game is more expensive than making a movie.
Oh, it's... Yeah. I mean, it makes sense when you realize all that they have to do, but it's just not widely known. It's so expensive.
It's crazy expensive.
Yeah. So that's cool, though.
So we're going to talk about adaptation and why it's so tricky to do Now D&D obviously is started out as a tabletop RPG. Like I actually used to have, I don't know what happened to it, but I used to own, there was a pamphlet before the game was called D&D that Gygax and his buddy, I forget his buddy's name, wrote, called Chainmail. And Chainmail, Chainmail was for miniatures gaming. It was for miniatures tabletop gaming. And Chainmail eventually evolved into what we think of as D&D when Gygax and his buddy evolved it to be more role-playing focused and less sort of tabletop miniature focused.
Yeah.
So that's where its roots were, obviously. But D&D has become so much bigger than that, right?
Right.
My wife and I just spent hundreds of hours playing a PlayStation 5 game called Baldur's Gate, which is D&D.
Baldur's Gate. Yeah.
So D&D has been video games. It has been at least two movies. More than that, actually. I think the terrible Wayans movie D&D had a sequel. But anyway, so there's been at least a couple of terrible D&D movies. Then the recent one, which was good.
Yes, but it's like the history of not good kind of sets you up to go into this new one,
right?
Like,
I think one of the things that works for the Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out recently is everybody's pulling the same direction.
Yes, 100%. It definitely feels like that. And the other thing that I really love about it, I mean, this kind of gets a little bit into adaptations, but the thing that it nailed to me that the 2000s movie I thought was kind of missing a little bit was Honor Among Thieves felt so much like it carried the spirit of the game. You know, like the spirit and the tone of the game, which I always think with these adaptations, like I think a lot about how I think Lord of the Rings is a pretty miraculous adaptation, like the three movies. Like it's, to me, like when you're familiar with the books, it's like these movies are kind of a miracle that they came together the way they did and as well as they did, right? Yeah. But I always think about something that Peter Jackson said with those, where he said like their main like modus operandi was to honor the tone and the spirit of the books, which meant, you know, you can't always tell the story exactly. You can't adapt it exactly because it doesn't always work. Like obviously, you know, I thought they made, I know we're not talking about these movies, but just as an example, you know, rearranging some of the events of the story, like stuff that took place in Two Towers, let's put it into Return of the King for, you know, just flow of things. But because it was so loyal to the spirit of the books, it's just so forgiving when it's not, you know, to the detail and to the letter, because you feel like it's honoring it, you know? And that's what I was so impressed with Honor Among Thieves did something that I thought was so cool, where there was such a spontaneity to the movie that really was so similar to the game in the sense it felt like it was heading in one direction and then a dice roll changed that to go in this direction. Or you think this is going to happen and then a dice roll makes something else happen. You know, like the movie just somehow had a spontaneity and a surprise element to it constantly, and it was just fun. Like it was just a big party. And I was reading this thing with the directors. I'm a big fan of them. And, you know, they write like most of their movies, I think all of their movies, but they put together like the cast and everybody, and they played D&D together. And their whole thing was like, we want the movie to feel like this. Like we want it to feel like sitting around the table doing this, and we should all be laughing. We should all be cracking up. We should be falling out of our chair with the, you know, this happening or that happening. But the movie feels like that the whole time. And you kind of walk out of it going like, man, I just feel like I was at the table having a good time. Like I just felt like I just went through a story and it was a blast, you know? And that's something that when you talk about adapting stuff, I thought it did exceptionally well, which I don't think is easy to do at all. Like, you know, when you're thinking a story, like I can't speak for you, but I know me, like I'm a structure hound. And so I'm constantly thinking about structure, but I know structure so often can get in the way of what the story wants to do or needs to do if you're not open to it. You know what I mean? If you're not paying attention to it. I
know writers who have drunk the Kool-Aid of there is only one structure for a script, and refuse to deviate from that and think anything that deviates from that is doing it wrong. Yeah. And yeah, that's the other way to do it wrong, is to be too hung up on that stuff. Yeah.
Totally agreed. Like this movie took so many U-turns or 180s I just was constantly surprised by it and constantly excited by it. Like all the way to the end. I was just like, man, I can't believe this movie. And it had a whole lot of heart. Like, it wasn't funny for the sake of funny. You know, it was, it had the stakes were real.
It wasn't the wacky sidekick mugging at the camera.
100%. And they were saying that's the other thing that, what is it? Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis Daly, they were, they said that their inspirations, which seemed appropriate for us, was Indiana Jones, which I was like, great.
Yeah.
Princess Bride.
Yep.
And then they said Monty Python and Lord of the Rings, and then Ocean's 11.
Right.
Just
because it is a heist
funny
movie.
Melting pot. But it is. It's totally a heist movie.
Yeah.
But their whole thing was that when they were talking about Princess Bride, they said something that I loved, where they were talking about how the movie is a comedy, but it's never making fun of the genre. It's never belittling the genre. The comedy is coming out of honest sincerity of the rules of this world.
And it never makes fun of the feelings of the two main characters for each other.
Yes.
And that is incredibly important.
Yes.
Totally. My writing partner, Daniel Abraham, he talks about how the rule in romance, in romantic comedy, because he's a big romantic comedy fan. I am not, but he loves romantic comedies. And he says the rule is, I mean, there are some that are good. Sure.
Yeah.
He says the rule is you can laugh at anything except for the feelings the two characters have for each other. That can never be the source of the comedy.
That makes a lot of sense.
And Princess Bride, I think, follows that rule.
100%.
We never laugh at Buttercup and Wesley's feelings for each other.
No.
We can laugh at everything else.
And there's a lot else to laugh at, but you're right. Yeah. That is the one thing.
And we can't laugh at Inigo Montoya wanting revenge for his father.
No.
So the things that should have an actual human emotion connected to them do, and we don't laugh at that. And and you're right that Honor Among Thieves does a good job with that. So there's a lot of goofy stuff. I mean, let's face it, Chris Pine is just playing for comedy the whole way through, and he's good at it. He's a good comedic actor.
Surprisingly,
so he does a great job.
More than I expected. Yeah, for sure.
But his caring about the people that he's with is never the source of the joke.
Yeah, or his daughter, like the stakes for his relationship with his daughter, stakes for his responsibility to the team. You're right. That is never the joke.
Right.
Like, those are the stakes, and the stakes are never belittled. They're never minimized, which is why the movie works.
And even in moments where we think they're crossing that line, they don't. So when we meet Michelle Rodriguez, as, by the way, I'm just going to state for the record, one of the I'm going to do an aside, and then we'll come back. One of the things that this movie nails is, and I think this is one of the most difficult things to nail in adaptation, is if you watch an adaptation and it feels like the filmmakers are ignoring everything about the thing that they're adapting. Like, if you're watching an adaptation of a video game and nothing in the adaptation feels like the game, that's a fail.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
you can go too far the other way, where everything feels like it has to be directly lifted from the thing you're adapting.
Yeah.
Then it just feels like a list of things that come from the adapted material, and that's also a fail.
It feels a little hamstrung as opposed to free to breathe where it needs to.
Right. And also it feels very exclusionary to people who haven't played that thing.
Yes.
Because they don't understand why any of the things that are happening.
Yes.
So the tightrope that Honor Among Thieves walks is, if you have played D&D, there are things happening in the movie where you go, oh my God, I know what that is. If you haven't, it doesn't matter, because you still are enjoying the thing that's happening.
Exactly right. Exactly.
And that is very tricky to do. And
so hard.
The one perfect example of that for me, and the reason I'm going on this little aside here, is Michelle Rodriguez, who is clearly playing a barbarian.
Right.
Right. And if you play a D&D, you know, the barbarian class. And the thing that they nail is they never say she's a barbarian. Nobody ever calls her a barbarian. Nobody ever talks about the fact that barbarians enrage when they go into battle. It never comes up. Nobody mentions that rule, right?
Right.
But I watched that movie, and I can tell you the exact moments where the player of Michelle Rodriguez's character says, "Oh, I'm enraging now."
That's so funny.
If you have played the game, you go, "Oh, she just enraged." And it's those moments where suddenly she's just tossing guys around like they don't weigh anything.
Right. Yeah. Oh, she has some incredible fight scenes too.
Yeah, some incredible fight scenes. And
really well done.
That style of adaptation where it's like, if you've played D&D, you're watching this and going, oh, Michelle Rodriguez's character just enraged. Holga, I guess is her name. Holga just enraged. But if you've never played D&D, it doesn't matter. She's the strong-looking girl fighter, so of course she's tossing guys around. You never, the mechanic of why that works in the game is never relevant. But if you played the game, you totally get what mechanic they're using, right? And that's so tricky to do. But the reason I bring that up is because Holga, as a character, there's a moment where you think they're going to do that. You think they're going to make fun of it. When she goes back, she meets with her husband.
Yeah.
And he's the little halfling character, right? And she's so big and powerful, and he's
little mini Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, and you think, oh, they're going to make fun of this, but they never make fun of her feelings for him.
No,
she is clearly devastated by the fact that he has taken up with this other woman. Now, there's comedy in the scene. The other woman who comes in is also a giant, like this huge, even bigger than Holga, right?
But it's not playing it like shtick. Like
they're playing it like shtick.
Because even like that's part of what's so funny is how sincere Bradley Cooper is too. He's like, I feel like we just kind of grew apart. And it's like this scene in any other context. If you just put the text in a coffee shop, modern day, it's it's slapstick.
Yeah, but it never comes across as slapstick.
Yeah,
and because Holga's feelings are never made fun of. Yeah. Bradley Cooper's feelings are never made fun of, right? The situation is silly just because of what it is. And again, if you play D&D, you wonder, like, do halflings date the other races? Like, do these tiny little 3 foot tall people date the 6.5 foot tall half orc guys? Right?
Yeah,
Does that happen? So you've wondered that when you play the game, and they're showing you that, but they're not making fun of it. They're not making fun of. Like, she clearly cared about him, and she's devastated that he left. Right? Yeah. And that's not made fun of.
Not at all.
That's so tricky to do in this kind of thing, where the humor is still there, but you're not making fun of the feelings of the characters.
It's a really challenging tightrope walk, I think, just by itself. But then also the fact that the movie is constantly playing equally to the fans, to non-fans. You know, like you said already, fans of the game, fans will have all the Easter eggs and stuff, right? But none of them are like winks to the camera that would alienate people who don't know what they are.
Right.
You know, and that's another thing that I feel like is so hard to do. And I feel like Star Wars has failed at quite a lot.
Yeah.
You know, but then at the same time, like, I don't know, like I was listening, another thing that the directors talked about was how what Paramount had told them was they really wanted a movie. And this was based off of just their opinions of the previous Dungeons and Dragons movie. They really wanted a movie for everybody. And what they cited was the first Star Trek, the 2009, what was that Star Trek that JJ did?
The Chris Pine one.
Yeah, the Chris Pine Star Trek. Yeah. And they were like, we felt like that was a movie that was made for everybody, not just Star Trek fans, which I think was much to the chagrin of the Star Trek fans. But
they turned Star Trek into Star Wars. And
exactly.
And there's a lot of Star Wars fans. So you got the Star Wars fans.
Yes, exactly. But I feel like this movie actually does it even better. But I mean, also, I'm sure the fan base is not quite as volatile because they haven't had a good movie yet. You know?
Right.
So, but I it's so hard to do the things that they did in this movie, and it's just so impressive to me.
Yeah, and so I mean, some of the elements that they really nail, the one that I already mentioned, that if you are familiar with the rules, you can actually see what rule is being enacted at the table in scenes in the movie. And the first time I felt that is and this is a Michelle Rodriguez thing. It's where they're on the steps and they're getting ready to execute them, right?
Yeah,
and you know they're bent over, and then, like, they're getting ready to cut their heads off, and then Michelle Rodriguez just tears that stone out of the ground and starts hitting guys with it. And she's actually picking people up and throwing them around.
That
and
scene is so good.
Stuff. It's a great scene. But I'm sitting there. My wife and I are watching the movie. I turned to her. I said, "Oh, Holga just enraged." That's what just happened. The player of Holga turned to the DM and said, "Oh, I'm going to have Holga enraged now." And here we go. All of the things that are happening are because you now have an enraged barbarian.
Yeah.
The other thing I loved, that I'm saying this to Janae as we're watching it, is Chris Pine is obviously playing a bard.
Yeah.
And he's obviously playing a social skills focused bard. And he's as useless as a social skills focused bard is. He is useless in this movie. Like, he never does anything except...
That scene is a perfect example. He's just like backed up against the wall, just watching it happen. And every once in a while, like, behind you. Like, but that's...
get that one.
Yeah. But it's brilliant because it's like... He's constantly trying to justify himself, but the story is also justifying his presence, right? Like, I'm the guy with the plan, you know? But really, what I love is all of the emotional stakes are really on him and his relationship with Michelle Rodriguez, his pursuit for his daughter. Hugh Grant ultimately betrayed him. You know, like, he's totally useless, but you're just so on board with whatever he has to do and however he can convince these people to help him.
Yeah, he's like, the heart. He's the heart of the emotional stakes. Of the movie.
100%.
Everybody around him is more badass than he is. But that is always true when you're playing the social skills focused bard. Like, you are the least badass person in the party. The only thing you have is, like, when we go into town, let me do the talking to the town guy because I've got the highest persuade skill.
Yeah.
But that's all he's got is that high persuasion skill.
That's all he has. Actually, one of my favorite scenes of the movie is when they first get the was she a halfling, the shapeshifter?
No, she's I believe she's an elf or a half elf.
Yeah. She was great. It was the Sophie.
By the way, what's her name? Sophia Lillis. She was the redhead in It. She was the teenage version or the young version of in part one.
Great in it.
She was great in that movie. Like, has some really powerful scenes in that movie. The scene where she's like scenes where she's confronting her father. That scene where she goes into the pharmacy and the creepy old dude at the pharmacy is clearly hitting on her when she's like 14, and he's clearly hitting on her.
It's a tough role.
It's a tough role, and she crushed it. I remember watching that movie, the first part though. And going, man, this might be one of the best Stephen King adaptations ever. Yeah. And whoever this actor is, she's great. And I hope she's in a lot more stuff. So when she showed up in this movie, I was very happy for her. I'm like, okay, she's getting to do more stuff. She's not going to be trapped in the
and she's great. Like, she doesn't have quite the same level of, like, meat in the role, but she just does, like, she has the whole sequence where she's in the castle, like on a reconnaissance, you know, and then the shape shifting from the, what was it, to the fly, to the rat, to the hawk. And, like, that whole sequence is unbelievable, actually, because they stage it all as a oneer. And obviously it's, you know, digitally helped, but it's so
my God,
well
you
constructed.
Directors and your fucking oneers, man.
Sorry, I know. But I was like, oh, it's still going. How did they? Oh, I was nerding out over that.
As a television producer, the most heart-sinking moment in any production meeting is when the director goes, I want to shoot this sequence as a oneer. And you're just like,
I will say this as an aside. I respect them. I haven't myself felt a ton of need to do them.
Yeah.
That's not something where I go, the juice is worth the squeeze on this. But I mean, and I respect it, but every DP I've ever worked with is always pushing for one. Like, is the DPs that are always like,
Jeremy Benning, our DP, I don't think he was ever the person pushing for the oneers. I can name who was pushing for the oneers. I'm not going to. I don't want to publicly embarrass them. And they're a friend of mine.
I can guess off the record.
I can tell you exactly who was always pushing for the oneer. Because funny. As a writer, the thing you hear when somebody says, I want to shoot this as a oneer is like, oh, we're going to lose all of the detail of the story.
Yeah. I mean, I completely understand that.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense.
That aside, but that is an amazing sequence, and she is a great actor. I really like her. I think she was the standout best in that first episode of It, and she was surrounded by a lot of great actors. So
no, I agree.
So and I had not seen her in things before that. So when she was as good or better than these much more seasoned actors around her, I was really impressed by that. And so when she showed up in this and was great in this too, I'm like, okay, this is a person who's going to have a career.
Yeah, like she
can do all of the things. Yeah,
she can do the things. That was the scene that I was referencing when she's at the table when they first kind of recruit her, and she's like, well, what do you do? And what do you do? And then she gets to Chris Pine and how he's having to justify himself. He's like, well, I have the plan.
I am the person with a plan. And I have people skills, damn it. I have people skills.
But she's kind of like, if this was the Avengers, her character is almost like the Hulk of the team, right? Yes. Where it's like, dude, she has kind of the most power of everybody feels
yes,
like
when she turns into an owlbear, yeah, some shit gets wrecked for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, if you played the game, you know what an owlbear is. If you haven't played the game, she still turns into this cool thing that wrecks stuff. So it doesn't matter that you don't know what that is.
Exactly.
But you know, if you played the game, you're like, oh my god, she's turning into an owlbear, and then just annihilating stuff. By the way, in the Baldur's Gate 3 game that came out recently, there is a druid build where you can turn into an owlbear, and there are ways to develop that build so you can just wreck everything.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, so it is.
That's awesome.
That's still, you know, I mean, they're still in keeping with the spirit of the game. But so we have these the you know, like the guy the magic guy who can't control his power. Yeah. If you've played the game, you know, oh, he's a wild magic sorcerer. That's what he is. But it doesn't matter if you haven't played the game, because he's just a guy who can't control his magic, and sometimes magic does crazy stuff. Right? Yeah.
But it's like, I don't mean it in a belittling way, but like kind of screenwriting 101, but it's done to perfection, where everybody has their flaw and everybody has the mission, and it's a matter of seeing how they overcome it by the end. But that's hard to do for every single character.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not an easy, you succeed by doing it for your main character, but the fact that every character had some kind of arc and journey, and his was actually really heartfelt too. You know, you kind of think he's the comic relief at first, like, oh, I know how to do magic, but I don't know how to do it well, and I can't remember everything, and how he's kind of a con man and stealing everybody's money behind their back magically while he's doing horrible tricks. But then by the end, when he like has the helmet on and he needs to like use that helmet thing to get into the safe, and he's confronting what he ultimately finds out is his future self, you know, and his own confidence and all this stuff. But I'm like, this movie surprised me by going this deep, because I was already in it without it going there, and to go there was so moving.
Even Hugh Grant has an arc.
Yeah, totally.
Even Hugh Grant, who's playing the bad guy.
He's excellent. He's excellent in the movie too.
He's an interesting bad guy, because he's not a Dark Lord. He doesn't have vast magical powers that he wants to dominate the world with. He's just a guy who made a deal with the devil to get a little money and a little power, and
he's just
starts to regret that deal, starts to realize that maybe he's screwed up when he made that deal, and you know, by the end is like, I think I have made a mistake, and I'm going to try to not do any more damage and just get away with some money. Right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting arc for a D&D bad guys, because so often, and I believe me, I played a ton of D&D, the bad guys are always Dark Lords. They're always Sauron. They're always like the necromancer with vast power and an army of the undead. And now we still get that, because you have the guy
indirectly. Yeah,
you have the guy that they're trying to bring back, and you have those worshipers of this evil god and the undead that are rising and all these. So you still get that element of it.
Right.
But it's not Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant's just a guy who made a deal with the devil and is going, I just wanted power and money, and this is too far.
It's kind of more than I thought I was doing. But yeah, exactly. And it's also a great balance of tone, because it's a way of connecting to that darker side of the world of D&D, but still having a connection to it that's honest to the characters. Like the idea of a bunch of criminals being betrayed by one of their own, you know, it's like, okay, this is all making sense. And then he made a deal with the wrong group, but it incorporated a side to that world, felt really organically. Because I feel like if the bad version of it would have been Hugh Grant decided he wanted to become some kind of Dark Lord warlock and started practicing all this, and it would be like, what? It was so much more interesting what they did.
The shortcut version is they steal the thing, Hugh Grant puts on the thing, and that turns him into the Dark Lord. Right? Like, I now, you know, it's the ring of power, right? It's like, I have the crown of Dark Lordness, or I have the scepter of Dark Lordness, and now it turns me into that. That's the shorthand version, and that is the version that comes up in games a lot, because let's face it, a lot of DMs are not particularly creative, and it's the version that comes up when they do hacked versions of this story, where it is creating a character with some some emotional stakes and who gets in over his head. That's tricky to write. It's much easier to write is these con men break into the vault. There's the ring of evil undeadness. One of them betrays the others and puts it on, and now he's the Dark Lord.
Now he's the Dark Lord. That's easy.
Guy. That way we quickly get to the now we know the stakes, the Dark Lord versus the Chris Pine, you know.
Right.
It's less interesting, though.
Less interesting. Exactly right. And I'm sure that they were probably pretty cognizant of what they wanted to do with the whole daughter story. Like, it would have been far-fetched to, like, it was just smart. That's just the thing, is it was just much more intelligent than I think I expected going into it. I mean, I was hoping that it would be good, but because I was a fan of the filmmakers, but it was just so well done. Like, I love that. And I'm a big fan these days, and I feel like it's probably just because we do this for a living, and I think audiences are really savvy of movies, because we just live in a day and age where everyone has existed with movies in their lives all the time. And so I really love movies that know how to subvert expectations, because everybody has some kind of expectation or prediction of what's going to be happening inherently, whether it's conscious or not, right? Like, we all speak the language of movies. And when a movie can just completely subvert expectations, it's something that always is impressive to me, whether it's a choice I like or not. I'm always impressed that they recognized, you knew that I expected it to go this way, and I thought you were going to zig and you zagged, and I love that. Like, I just loved the fact that they had a dragon, and they were building up to the big reveal of the dragon down in the, what was it? The big old, like,
down
abyss,
in the Underdark.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it just turned out to be this dragon that never left, and so the dragon's just fat and lazy and can barely chase after him and all this stuff. And I was like, that makes
which, by the way, is a real dragon from the source material.
I didn't know that. No way.
They used a real from the source material. They used a dragon that is actually one of the creatures that's down in the Underdark. Yeah,
I respect it even more.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
You're right. It is, and in the source material where that dragon appears, it is played as a little comedic.
Yeah,
there's this dragon that's so fat it can't
get
out of the cave anymore.
Yeah,
and they let it be that, but it's still a threat.
Like, the danger's no less.
The danger is still real, you know.
Like, it was really smart when, like, all of a sudden the dragon just starts rolling down the hill at him, and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, like, you're about to die if you don't. Like, this is great.
This is a couple dozen tons of dragon rolling towards you. He doesn't need to bite you. He can just roll over you and you're still dead.
Well, you know what's funny? So, talking about the dragon, because I know you and I have talked about this quite a lot, the use of practical effects versus not. And obviously the dragon was not. But I was shocked at how much of this movie is practical, and, like, just the dedication that they had to actually, and the directors talk about it quite a bit, but they built every creature that they could build to put in camera, they did. And maybe some of them they had to enhance digitally or not. And then the creatures they had no option to, obviously, were digital, like dragons. But they also, when you watch the movie, you notice most of the sets are real sets. There's not a ton of green screen movie. Like, even like the underworld, like we were talking about, I thought was for sure largely green screen, but they actually built most of it, and they just enhanced it. I mean, they're doing a lot of
set extension, right?
Yeah, a lot of set extension, but they built.
But having the thing that the actors are walking through be real really changes so much of how actors behave.
Yes, 100%.
And I've gotten to the point now where I can spot entirely green screen scenes in movies and TV shows, not by the bad effect, but by the way the actors behave.
Yes, because, like, if they're walking by a stair railing and their hand doesn't brush the rail, right? Like, it's just the interaction with the environment that's natural and not even conscious on the performer's mind. It's just the environment, or just leaning against the wall for no reason.
Yeah.
And I did love how this movie just felt so practical.
And the fact that they built the sets that the actors are walking through means the actors are interacting with their environment. And then set extensions, you know, you can make it bigger with set extension, and that's fine, because the actor doesn't need that. They just need the physical space. The
distance isn't something they would fully be reacting to anyways. And so it's like, and it's like we've talked about, like, enhancing something that is there feels so much better than it not being there at all. It's just so cool that it's on all these sets. Like, the movie actually feels pretty big. Like, for a Journey movie, Like it's a heist movie and it's a journey movie, but it's all fantasy. And it's like, this, like when I've rewatched it, I'm like, this movie is kind of all over the place geographically.
Yeah.
In a pretty epic way, like more than you really give it credit for. This is a big movie.
Yeah. Which the experience of playing D&D is that. Like one session you're in the Underdark trying to escape, and then the next session you're in the city, and then the next session you're out in the woods hunting for something, and that is the experience of playing the game.
Yeah.
So replicating that in the movie, that the feel of playing the game, where each session feels like it's in a different spot, but having it still feel like a single story, which is the trick that a DM has to pull off in D&D. The trick they have to pull off is making all of this disparate stuff feel like one story. And that's what this movie had to do. And I think that more than anything else is what these filmmakers nailed is, yes, we're going to have all these different characters with different motivations. We're going to have all these different scenes and settings, and we're going to have castles and cities and the Underdark and woods and all this stuff. But it will all, and you know, the prison at the beginning, the ice prison at the beginning. Yeah, we're going to have it all still feel like it's one story that is at heart. It is, what's Chris Pine's Edgin? It's at heart, it's Edgin and Holga's story.
Edgin and Holga's story. Yeah, I was just going to say the whole thing's anchored on them from the first scene of the movie onward, which is why it works.
Yeah,
and it's also brilliant, the idea of structuring it like a heist movie, because it automatically gives you a simple structure for traveling to different places for a connected reason, right? Like we need to go recruit the team, and now that we got the team, we got to go get this thing in order to do the thing, and it just allows it to become a quest really organically. It's really smart on their part.
So the thing that you brought up early on that I do want to mention before we stop talking about this is the experience of playing D&D in a good group. Now, in a bad group is just, being in a bad D&D group is like being in a bad marriage. It's just miserable for everyone involved. And you just can't wait for it to be over.
God, I need to get out of here.
Being in a good group is, there's a lot of laughing.
Yeah.
A good D&D table is a party. It's laughing. Yeah. People are having some beverages. They're eating some Cheetos. When you roll a 1 on a really important roll, everybody just goes, "Oh!" Everybody's laughing at you because you just fumbled your attack.
Right.
And that is that you said this early on, and I want to agree with you and give you props for it. That is the tone that the movie nails. Is the fun of it.
Nails it.
That there is fun to be had when Edgin is watching Hulk out and just wreck everybody. He's having a good time. He's smiling and he's watching. He's like, like watching guys get tossed around, and you get the sense that he's been with her long enough. He's seen this before. He knows what's going to happen. His really job is to just stay out of the way.
It makes you realize how familiar they are with each other. Like even in their first scene, when they just do this whole drawn out setup of this ogre being put in the cell with them. Right. And then it just turns into he touched her potato.
He touched her potato. And and Chris Pine's like, don't do it, dude.
I wouldn't do that.
It's not worth it. I wouldn't touch that potato.
And she decimates the guy, and he's just like, I'm thinking about making mittens. Like he just isn't even, but it's such a funny but clever way to show their history together, their unseen history, right? And the familiarity. Exactly. And like you said, like when she's hulking out and like fighting all those guys, and he just knows exactly what to do and how to contribute, which is little, but
mostly you stay out of the way.
Right. Yeah. But until it's over. So well done. But that's what I mean is like the movie. And that's the thing about a D&D session too, is like when you have a good time with all your friends doing it, the story is really secondary to the experience you had, right? Because the story was what gave you the experience, but you're not walking away going like, oh, well, it didn't turn out so well. We just had a good time playing.
Yeah.
And the movie feels like that, except I did like the story, but you have such a good time watching it. I'm not even sitting here analyzing the story.
Yeah.
Even though it's solid, but
it's the best version. So my wife and I have been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3, and that's D&D, but we're playing together. It's co-op, so we each have our little character, and you get the other guy, you recruit other guys. So we have a little band of adventurers are going around, and in the best sessions of playing together, it's like that. I made us margaritas. We're sitting on the love seat with our 2 PlayStations and our 2 TVs, and we're playing together and drinking margaritas and having a good time.
Awesome.
And there's that feeling of like, so in the most not to go too far into D&D stuff, but in the most recent playthrough we've been doing, she's playing a character who has maximized when she throws weapons, she does massive amounts of damage, right? And it's kind of a Hulk character, kind of a barbarian, muscly character. And so, we'll be playing. I go, oh, hey, honey, can you kill that one? And then just see her character heave something, and the guy just goes flying off the screen. Thank you, dear. And it's like, and watching D&D made me think of that, where Chris Pine's like, oh, take that one out. And then, Holga's like, smash. And then like, oh, thank you, dear. It is totally that feeling.
You know what it is? I didn't think about it until you said it. Yes. And I think I didn't think about it until you said it, but you're right. Because one of the things the movie's doing is really all, like, the main characters really are us, even though they're characters in these movies.
Right.
They're thinking like a modern day audience member, and they're thinking like a contemporary human being, right?
But they're not going so far that they become meta, which is very distracting.
Exactly. It's just it's just like you said, like with you and your wife, it's us in this world doing this thing and trying to do it well and sincerely. But
I mean, it's Janae and I are playing Baldur's Gate 3 together. I'm the bard character, and she's the hulked out barbarian character who is specialized in throwing weapons.
And I'm like,
and I'm going, hey dear, so that one over there who's shooting at us, can you just kill him? And then I just see a spear fly across the screen. That guy gets annihilated. Thank you, dear.
I'm like, thanks.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm like playing my lute and trying to inspire everybody.
Oh my God, guys! So funny.
Yeah, but
that's the movie. Like the movie does that the whole time.
Yeah. The movie is constantly doing that.
It succeeds in spades with that, which is why I just think it just, like I already said, like it just made me think of the adaptations. The other adaptations of source material that I think really work are just the ones that are very sincere to the tone and the spirit of the source material.
Do you agree that it also feels a little bit like lightning in a bottle? Like I would have great fear if they made a sequel.
Oh, like, I would be nervous.
Think this would be so hard to do twice.
I agree. Like I think I'm thinking about it live with you, and the example I think of is Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl.
Yeah,
that movie. That
so
movie
surprising.
Is a lot like this in a similar way. It was.
I agree.
It exceeded so many expectations. It was so surprising, but also just so good. Like just front to back, top to bottom, great.
Yep.
The sequel, with all the same team members involved, it's almost like, and this is, I mean, kind of gets in a bigger conversation about sequels, but it's almost like I feel like they made the sequel before they knew what worked so great about the first movie. So the sequel feels like kind of a greatest hits.
Right.
You liked this. What if we give you 2 times more of it? Or you like this, or like where it, I mean, it has some great elements too. Like it's not void of anything, but it just feels like it wasn't quite objective enough to know what made the first one great. Whereas these, I feel confident if John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein got a chance to make a sequel, I'm confident they would know what to do, but I do get worried about it because it's just,
that's high praise from a director that you would trust these guys enough to think that they could pull it off again.
Well, you know what they did was they made what I think was a great sequel. They made Horrible Bosses 2. And I don't think those movies are necessarily on the Mount Rushmore of cinema, but I do think but I do think that the sequel kind of exceeded the first one in the sense of like, I was really impressed to see someone who did not make the first movie come to a sequel and really see what had been captured in the first one and go, okay, here's how we can distill this in a way that we can tell the story again, enhancing the things that worked really well. And it exceeds, and I feel like it's because of that I feel like they got to do a sequel. I mean, also just hearing how they made this movie, how so much of it was them trying to just play D&D all together and just trying to capture the spontaneity and just the storytelling of playing the game. I feel like if they approached doing a sequel in a similar way, they would probably stumble onto something that feels very organic. The bad sequel would be the movie that continues this story, right? Like it would need to be its own thing, and maybe with
Chris
most
Pine
everybody,
cannot go rescue his daughter again.
No. Like it has to be.
Oh no, my daughter's been kidnapped again. I got to go rescue her again.
Yep.
Yeah.
It has to be just its own. You know, kind of like when you're playing like this the game where sometimes it's like what you're sitting down to is its complete own thing. It's not necessarily always going to be a continuation of what you did.
Right.
And I feel like a sequel that did that would be great. But I don't know. I'm actually kind of bummed because I don't think we're going to get a sequel to it. Like it didn't do. I was really surprised that the movie didn't do well, which was
it didn't.
It was the other surprise when I saw it was just all the reviews were positive, all the fan reactions were really positive, but the box office wasn't great at all.
Yeah, was that during the period when nobody was going to the movies?
It was COVID. I mean, I think there's enough desire for it. But like you said, even the director said they were not planning on creating a universe for this, and they weren't originally planning on doing more. But I do like what you guys are saying is like, if they're going to make more, introduce other people.
Yeah.
Like it could be the British actor from Bridgerton.
Reggae Jean-Paul.
Who had a small role in this, where it becomes his quest, where you're taking avenues versus, hey, let's get the band together and let's just make a new movie with all the same people again.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult to do. But you know, your faith in these filmmakers is,
I love these guys,
is heartening. So if this team decides to do another one, I'm not gonna pre-hate. I'm gonna give it a shot because
if they were doing it, I would be hopeful. I would not be hopeful of somebody else coming in and doing it just because the track record of
as a director and as somebody who like you probably I assume you make your rent money with pay for higher work. I mean, like commercials and that kind of stuff probably pays the rent. But your passion is making films, I assume. Right? Yeah. So if somebody came to you and said, we would like to hire you to do the D&D 2 movie, would you be willing to do it? And how terrified would you be to try to do something like this?
I feel like if that happened today, I would 100% do it. I don't know if I'd feel terrified because I don't know if enough people are expecting it for me to be worried. But the first thing I would do is I'd call you. I'd be like, dude,
let's play some D&D.
Yeah, honestly, yes. Like I would be like, hey, so let's like form a creative team or like a creative brain trust, and let's just play some D&D. You know what I mean? Like, and just let the game dictate ideas. Like that is your brainstorm, and that's what's so cool about this property specifically is that it has a game like D&D. That
brainstorming is built into it.
It's built into it. It's literally built into it, and so I just feel like that becomes actually pretty easy, but I mean, I say that, I don't know, but then I'd be terrified. After that, I'd be terrified.
Okay. So now we've talked about adaptation, why it's so hard to do. Apparently Joseph had the patrons come up with a list of adaptations, and we can trash on these adaptations and talk about why they all did it wrong.
Oh,
so Joseph, give us the list.
Hell yes.
We're gonna talk shit about other people.
I mean, this could be if you guys want to just do guilty pleasure top 5 best movies based on a game.
I think that's what it's gonna wind up being. Oh my god, some of these I had forgotten existed.
I think you wiped them from your memory on purpose.
I did. Some of these I absolutely wiped from my memory. So adaptations, as I'm sure you are aware, are so often just blatant cash grabs. Thing is popular. We should make a movie of Thing, and then people will come see Thing, and they will give us their money. And there's just no creative impetus to it. It is strictly we want money. If we make Thing into a movie, people give us money. We want that money. Angry Birds should be at the top of the list for that reason. They're like, you know what's really popular? A video game called Angry Birds. Let's make a movie of Angry Birds.
A smart producer would go, well, what's the story of it? Is there a story?
The story is birds knock down pigs.
But yeah, exactly. It's just like, no, so it's just birds flying and knocking down pigs, and we got a movie. Like, no, you don't.
No, you don't. No, you don't. That's not a movie. Yeah.
You do not.
And literally no one in the room said those words. No one in the room was like, I don't think this is actually a movie, guys.
No, they were all just like, I think we can get Jason Sudeikis. It's so...
Do you watch Ryan George, the guy who does Pitch Meeting?
Oh, yes. It's so good.
I love Pitch Meeting. I think Ryan George is a comedic genius.
It's brilliant.
And the one that always strikes true to me is what producer guy, like, why would we make this? And the other guy goes, because then people will give us their money. He's like, okay, now I'm on board.
Right. Yeah.
And you could, and like everybody who's involved in the creation of Angry Birds is that character from Pitch Meeting going, why would we do this? It's about birds knocking down pigs. Why are we doing this? Because then people will give us money. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a great idea.
We're going to make a ton of money really easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
now, you know, what's funny is the first movie that stood out to me when I saw this list was, I think Clue is so good. I forget it's an adaptation.
Clue is, yes, Clue is a under-respected adaptation.
Yeah, I know it's an adaptation of the game, but my brain doesn't automatically put it on this list when we're thinking of...
Did you go see it in the theater back in the days when you got different endings depending on when you
went? I try. Yeah. I tell my kids about that. Like, you don't understand the different endings. Like,
you got different endings.
Which
was
cool.
such a brilliant idea to get people to see the movie more than once.
You could never do it today. I wish you could. But it was brilliant.
Now, where you could do it today is on a streaming platform.
Yes, 100%. I wish
they
should do that. I feel Netflix like it's even easier.
It's even easier now. Yeah,
it's even easier.
So they should be doing stuff with different endings. Just do it on one of the streamers. Yeah. So obviously, Clue and Honor Among Thieves, I think, are the two best on this list. Now, I'm going to state for the record that I am a giant fan of Duncan Jones.
Oh yeah.
I do not think Warcraft worked, but I really respect. The thing I respect about Warcraft is Duncan Jones is a player of World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
He loves that universe, and he was trying to make a movie that felt like playing the game. I don't think it worked.
I agree with you. I feel like its intentions were pure.
Its intentions were pure. He was not a guy who was going. He was not the guy from Pitch Meeting going, then people will give us money, and we like money. He actually does like the game.
There is a story that can be told here. There's a world here. I completely agree.
And
with
I think he's a fantastic filmmaker. I think Moon is one of the best sci-fi movies ever.
He's proven his pedigree for sure.
Yeah.
Like I was actually reading, funny enough, just because we're on the movie, how Warcraft was expected to do much better than it did.
Yeah.
And its performance is the reason why Dungeons and Dragons didn't get greenlit until it finally did. Like, it was a major setback.
I'm sure there were a lot of stuff in the pipeline that got canceled because of the performance of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, that's interesting. But yeah, it didn't work.
I would say that Warcraft is the example. So, we were talking about there's two ways you can go wrong with this. You can completely ignore the source material, or you can pay too much attention to the source material. I think Warcraft is the one that failed because of the second one. I think it paid too much attention. It tried too hard to be exactly like the game. And and the game is not a movie. And I think if you're exactly like the game, you're making a movie that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So is there anything else on here that is a guilty pleasure?
I mean, I think the 1993 Super Mario Brothers is a really great... No, I'm kidding.
We were just talking about that. I will say, I liked Tomb Raider a lot better than most people did. But I didn't like the Angelina Jolie one. I liked the most recent one that they did with what's her name?
Vikander. What's her first?
The Ex Machina actor.
Yeah. That one was cool.
It was gritty. It was a little grittier. It was a little darker. It felt like playing the more recent versions of the game, not the sort of jokey early version of the game.
It felt more like a sincere adaptation, like trying to adapt the story to be compelling and interesting than the original.
Yeah.
But I also I'm biased because of my kids, but I had such a great time with Sonic the Hedgehog And I was like, that was a movie where I was like, how on earth do you even turn this into a movie? And it almost felt like it wasn't adapting the game. It was just like, hey, here's the characters.
I've never seen Sonic the Hedgehog. Because I assumed that it was terrible, and so I never watched any of them.
Here's the thing about it. That movie is Jim Carrey makes the movie. Like Jim Carrey makes it because it's like 90s Jim Carrey unleashed.
Okay.
And you're kind of watching it going like, oh, I remember this guy. Oh, he's so good.
He was very hit and miss for me. Like Wes is a gigantic Dumb and Dumber fan. I find Dumb and Dumber unwatchable. Like,
really?
It makes me want to claw my eyes out every time it's on.
You know, I bet, let me guess why though, because that is, I think Dumb and Dumber is awesome, but I recognize it as a stress comedy where the comedy is coming from a constant misunderstandings, confusion. Like it can be a very frustrating movie to watch. Like here's like a comedy I can't watch is Meet the Parents. That movie's it's just nothing but stress. And I'm like, I'm not even entertained. I'm just in a constant state of uncomfortable and stressed. This movie's not funny to me. You know? But I mean, I love Dumb and Dumber. But here's the thing, Jim Carrey, like I love Dumb and Dumber. I love Ace Ventura.
See, and Ace Ventura is another one that makes me want to claw my eyes out.
Yeah, I get it. But him in this movie, it was kind of like him going back to his roots a little bit. So maybe you won't like this movie. In fact, maybe don't watch it.
Well, so
he makes the whole thing.
The thing
it's
that I wanted
for sure.
The thing that I want to talk about is why these particular adaptations work for us. And I think Clue is interesting because Clue it's a comedy, because obviously the board game Clue has no tone. It's just you move around the house, you collect cards, you figure out the thing, right? There's no tone to it. So they could pick any tone they wanted. And I think very intelligently said the tone should be comedy. It should be funny. It should be a sleuth movie that plays for humor. Because the names are funny, you know, Miss Mustard, or Colonel Mustard, and Miss Plum, and you know,
as soon as you have to deal with those names, you know, you have to be a little bit tongue in cheek.
You got to be in a comedy, and so using Clue as sort of the skeleton on which you hung a bunch of comedy mystery flesh was the smart way to adapt it. That was very smart. And the other smart thing they did is they hired Lord Darkness himself, one of the greatest actors of all time.
It's like it's Tim Curry's like one of his best movies. But that's the other thing is another thing they did that Honor Amongst Thieves did too was the movie's stacked with an incredible cast. Like you're just so excited to see these people in a movie together doing this thing.
And I think for me the reason Tomb Raider worked, at least for me, and I know it wasn't a super popular movie, but for me the reason it worked is because it felt like playing the more recent versions of the game. Yeah, it had that darker tone. It had that sort of darker, grittier version of Lara Croft. Yeah. And the danger felt real. It felt like she was in a dangerous world where you can get killed. It didn't feel like she was just backflipping past bullets and nothing would ever hurt her, right? So you're saying Sonic the Hedgehog worked for you because it went back to an earlier version of the Jim Carrey comedy that you really liked. But as an adaptation, was there anything about the adaptation that particularly worked?
So here's what's interesting:
feel like playing the game.
It did not feel at all like playing the game. But what's funny is I feel like I don't know how that movie would even work in the first place. You know, like I don't know. We just haven't seen it. But Sonic was in it, and Sonic was doing what he does in the game, and he felt like Sonic, and Carrie felt like a version of Robotnik that preceded the Robotnik we had in the game. I don't know. Like it felt entertaining. It felt like taking elements of the game that we know, but also like we were talking about before, it wasn't afraid to ignore the things that didn't make sense yet to adapt. I don't know why.
But like
I don't know why.
The game elements, though, I was like wondering how are they going to pull it off. But like the rings, they introduced
like the rings
it
play
in
an interesting
way. I mean, like as far as like the game elements, they're just like little garnish. But at least they made sense in the context of how they were trying to set up the story. And I will admit, when my daughter wanted to watch that movie, I'm like, oh my gosh, I was thinking I was gonna want to shoot myself I thought it was going to be
like, well,
Alvin and the Chipmunks,
as a parent.
but it actually turned to be enjoyable, but which was surprising.
Yeah, I actually had a great time.
Obviously, it did well enough. Well, then again, Angry Birds did well enough for multiple as well. But
yeah, I couldn't do that one. But I also, like, of course, my kids also like wanted to watch the new Super Mario Brothers movie, and that's just always a thing because we all had the '90s version live action, which I remember being a kid just being like, "This isn't the game at all." But then, you turn into an adult, and you're just like, "Yeah, how on earth do you turn this? This game was never made to be turned into a movie. Like, how do you do it?" In the new animated movie, I was actually surprised at how much story they were crafting around all the elements of the game that are absurd and ridiculous. And I was like, I
really enjoyed the new animated movie.
I was really impressed with it. I was like, wait, they're doing it. They're doing the thing. Like, here's these Brooklyn plumbers, Mario and Luigi's relationship is really endearing, them trying to prove themselves. Bowser was great. I was really surprised. By the time they got to the third act, and now they brought Bowser into the real world, and then the two brothers are working together.
I don't know why they felt the need to do that.
Yeah. But it just, it did feel like it mined so much out of the game, more than I ever thought someone could, and turn it into a story that actually made sense.
The thing that they did that I appreciated, and there's not a lot of this, but they did do one little hat tip to it that made me really happy. So if you play the Super Mario game, it's just a cute little character jumping. He's bonking turtles and he's like doing his little thing, right? And that's the tone of it is very sort of lighthearted.
Yeah.
But underneath that is this darkness because Mario spends 100%. A lot of time falling off of infinite cliffs and into spikes and and getting burned alive by fire, and turtles get bonked out of their shells and then picked up and thrown into lava. Like, that happens in the game a lot. Now, so there's this weird mix of, if you pay attention to what's happening in the game, there's some dark shit happening there, but the game never acknowledges that. It's just like, hey, he's turtles bonking.
I mean, you are going into the underworld, jumping over lava to save a woman who has been abducted by a dragon.
Yes, which you get rid of by dropping him into lava.
Yep.
And kicking most of his guys into lava, right?
Yeah.
And the thing I loved that they only go back to, I think, a couple of times, but it made me happy every time, is the little star in the cage.
Yes, that was the best part of the movie.
Got the cutest, sweetest little voice and talks about the horrible darkness in which they live.
Yep.
Every time that happened, I was happy.
I know, same. That was really, really smart.
Because it's a little bit of a hat tip to the darkness of the game that nobody talks about.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
And I assume, as a director, your favorite movie of all time is the 1995 Mortal Kombat, the best directed movie ever made.
No, listen. When we talk about practical effects,
talking about practical effects,
Reptile was gangbusters in that. Just he was like. But what's funny about Mortal Kombat? I just remember going to the theater to watch it, and every time the song came on, Mortal Kombat, I was in a theater where people were jumping up out of their seats, running into the aisle, and dancing. And I was just sitting there going, like, this movie's horrible, but at the same time, this is the best experience I've ever had.
It was like going to what's the name of it?
Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Rocky Horror. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. It really
was like going to Rocky Horror. People are dancing in the aisles
because the song, like, full on has like the call to action, right? Like before the song even starts, like Mortal Kombat, and everybody knows. All right, let's go, and everyone's jumping up, and then I was like, this is the funniest thing.
I do love. The one great change they made to the game is, of course, if you're going to have a Japanese thunder god, it should be played by a white French dude.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously.
Like, makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's like that. But it was fun watching it. I was just really disheartened watching. I mean, I had the same experience emotionally going to see Van Damme Street Fighter movie as I did seeing Bob Hoskins in Super Mario, where it's like, this was my life. And I was watching someone try and adapt things that were my life. And I went in going like, what happened?
What happened?
Why is this like this? Why is this like this?
What did you do? Why did you do that?
I don't, what? So those were not my favorite. But I think we picked some pretty solid ones. I do think Silent Hill was pretty solid
ones. I objectively understand it is not a good movie, and it does one of my least favorite things that a movie can do. But there is a lot about the Silent Hill movie that I, as a horror fan, there's a lot about the Silent Hill movie that I like.
Yeah, I'm totally on the same page.
It's not a good movie. I would never argue that it's a good movie, but there's some stuff in there I think that's really, some visuals that I think are really well done.
Yes.
So it is a movie that if it's on, I'll watch it.
Yeah, it's an honorable mention.
Can we talk about how great Doom is though when they do that POV gun cam?
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So you feel like you're playing the game. Oh, by the way, I want to briefly mention Uncharted, because we talked about the ways in which adaptations succeed and the ways in which they fail. I do want to mention Uncharted because I think Uncharted fails, but I think it fails for a very specific reason. Uncharted is incredibly poorly cast.
Yes, I was just going to say,
it's filled with great actors who are not playing the part they should be playing.
It lost so much of the core fan base just with casting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is a movie that fails for a very specific reason.
It does feel like it's the pitch meeting movie too, where it's like, oh yeah, you probably
who's popular right now.
Yeah, Tom Holland, just throw him in it and we're gonna get exactly.
Yeah.
No diss to him. I think he's great.
Oh, he's fantastic, but he's not Drake. He's not.
You know, there's a short film that got made as a concept pitch for Uncharted that stars Nathan Fillion.
See, now that is the right casting.
Yes.
Now
exactly right.
He was at that point. He was probably a little too old and a little too thick around the waist.
It was like a while ago, but it was like a director made a short film with Nathan Fillion and Stephen Lang, and like he had a pretty.
Oh my God, Stephen Lang is so great.
I know, he's just one of the greatest, and that's a cast where you go like, these look like
the guys in the
game. Like this looks like the game realized. I would go watch this, but
and Nathan Fillion has the sense of humor that Drake needs to have.
Yes, 100%. He's perfect. He is that character, and they missed their chance.
All right, so what is our patron top 5?
3 out of 5.
Oh, they went Resident Evil and Mortal Kombat.
Okay, all right.
I mean, a little guilty pleasure there.
Oh yeah. So I'm supposed to tell people to like and subscribe, even though we're going on a brief hiatus because Wes doesn't do his job. He's off in like Eastern Europe running guns with like Chechens or something. I don't know, some kind of thing like that. I assume when Wes comes back from running guns in Chechnya, we'll start this back up again. So if you want to like and subscribe in anticipation of that, feel free to do so. Also, Brett, he hasn't worked in a while. He really needs money. If you like, subscribe, and we get a lot of money, we'll give some to Brett.
Hey, well, thank you.
Oh, and Joseph. And Joseph gets a little money too, so his children don't have to eat shoes.
Yep.
Gross.
Are we all good? Are we done? Can we go now?
Say goodbye, Ty.
Fuck off, Joseph.